Counsel, remind me, we'll talk about juror number 98 at the break. Welcome back. So how did we do on our random acts of catering? Was it something that was acceptable, or?
Yeah.
Okay. You're being kind, I think.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Slisher, for the state.
All right. Juror number 27, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And they treated you okay at lunch?
They did.
All right. Well, I hope it wasn't so good that you fall asleep during my questioning. I needed to follow up on a couple of responses that you made regarding your prior knowledge of the case. And I think what you indicated was that you saw from the media reports that George Floyd had been arrested and following an exchange with the cops, and he was begging for his life. But you said that you don't know what happened before he was on the ground. And so I'm just wondering, in terms of your, what you're interested in learning, how would before what happened when George was on the ground affect your decision in this case?
My opinion, you mean?
Yeah, what are you hoping to learn? What are you hoping to learn about what happened?
Well, I'm hoping to learn how he got to the ground, and the one thing also that I heard from the news report was that there were multiple officers around, right? I want to know why there was only one person on him, how many were called, and and why was he arrested? I don't even know why. I think that's another question. I think it's important for me to understand the fact that that went into his arrest, and how he ended up dying.
Okay. So I also wanted to ask you if you know anyone, if you have a...
I think it's
The other one?
Yeah.
Is that better? Okay. Okay. Let's try that. There. Sir, I was wondering if you have any close friends or family members or someone you care about who's ever struggled with illegal drugs.
I do not.
You do not. Do you have any opinions about people who may have used illegal drugs?
I think, I think it's a hard question. I think people use illegal drugs for multiple reasons. I think athletes are using it. People use it for recreational purposes. It's legal in some state. So I think, I don't think my opinion matters really, how I feel about it.
And when I'm talking about illegal drugs, maybe I'll even say drugs, not including marijuana, but harder drugs.
Oh, okay.
Do you have any strong opinions one way or the other about the use of illegal drugs?
I know that we all know the impact of opioid, and obviously, it can impact people's life, and mental health is there. So I believe that us as a society, we need to look out for people who are struggling with those. Yeah.
And how would you look out for people who are struggling with the use of illegal drugs? How would you suggest that?
supporting them, caring. I mean, I'll give you one instance. There is one former basketball player. I can't even remember his name. They used to play for the Dallas, the Mavericks, and struggling with drugs addiction, was found on the street by the owner, supporting him, put him in rehab, and I think those are the support that we should give them.
That's something that you would agree with?
Correct.
Okay. You said in your questionnaire that you believe that the police in your community make you feel safe. You said you strongly agree that the police in your community make you feel safe. Can you tell us why they make you feel safe in your community?
Well, I think in my community, I think when there is a suspicious activity, the police will stop by, they'll ask a question, and I think that sense of security is all we want, right? We want to live in a community where we feel safe, and regardless of race, color, and gender, and so, I think that's the basic reason why I say that they make me feel safe. Yeah.
Okay. And have you or a close friend or family member within your current community, the community you're living now, have you had to call upon the police in your community to have them?
No.
No? Okay.
But I would say this. Personally, I have not, but I've seen, at least my neighborhood, I've seen the cops stop by and check up on them and a few times, and so I don't have any reason to believe that my community is unsafe.
Okay.
That's what I should probably say.
Sounds like you live in a pretty safe community.
For now.
All right. You also stated in the questionnaire that you strongly disagree with the concept of defunding the police. Can you explain that answer a little bit more thoroughly?
Yeah, I think some of those statements sometimes can be seen political. I think everybody has their reason, and I believe, in my opinion, that while I necessarily might not agree with the police action in some situation, I believe that in order for me to for the police to make my community safe, they have to have the right.
They have to have the funds to.
Yeah. So,
okay.
And I think that I can understand why people say, "Well, defund the police," because they are upset about things that are happening, and I sympathize with that. But at the same time, if we want the police to support our community, that's my opinion. Right? Yeah.
Okay. Do you believe that you would be able to evaluate the testimony of a police officer in the same way you could evaluate testimony of, say, a bystander?
I believe so.
Okay. You would have no reason to favor one person's testimony over the other?
No.
Okay. I'm interested, again, not in the specific location of your job, but just tell me what do you do? What is a day like for you? When they say IT, I have a hard time conceptualizing that.
Yeah, I think earlier we were talking about me being people's manager. So I would say it's a technical leadership role, right? When I have a team of engineers that report to me, their role is to enable our business and allow them to build application in the cloud securely, to add value to our customers. And so, as a manager, I make sure that my team is highly performing. They are, building solution for the business. They and also making sure that I'm helping them grow personally and professionally. It's not just about them coming to work for me or for the company, but also making sure that, well, their career path also is very important, and we want to see them succeed, whether it's with the current company or moving to another company, and also show empathy to them, right? I think those things are important because people come to work in today's, with COVID and people are working remote. You want to engage with your team and ensure that, well, whether they are going through personal stuff or you want to show some sort of empathy and make sure that you can relate to them. And so my role is not just managing them, but it's also, I always said this to my team, that I'm serving them, right? So I think that's my role.
It sounds like you're working more with people than machines. So when I think of IT, I think of the computers, and I was not understanding so much the technical aspect of your job, because I thought it said that you were in IT security. Is that right?
But it's well, DevOps and cloud and security. So being in IT doesn't mean that I have to be on with computer all the time, but it's about, in my role, it's about creating solution that solve problem, right? Mm-hmm. So the person who made Zoom, it's not just about being on some computer and creating Zoom, but it's about thinking about what kind of collaboration tool I can provide to people to help them collaborate and be in the courtroom. So that's the type of role that I have. So I have a team of engineers that work for me. We develop application and in the cloud, and enable our R&D, research and development team, to build application that not only reside on Prime but also in the cloud, and make sure that these applications are secure. That's where the security part comes in place, right? That include identity access management and security assessment and security audit and all this stuff, and as well as making. So that's the technical side, and the other part is the people's manager side.
I noticed at the time that you answered your questionnaire, you said that you were off social media. Is that right?
I am.
Yeah. And so with your IT and IT security background, I was just wondering if you could tell us why you're not on social media.
It's a personal decision. I mean, I mean, everybody have the right to be on social media or not. I mean, there is a lot of things that are going on social media. I closed my Facebook account. I don't even remember, maybe almost 10 years ago. So I mean, it comes down to me being someone who likes security. I think for me it's more about ensuring that my personal information are secure. I'll give you one example. I closed my Facebook account, like I said, almost 10 years ago, I believe. And there was one day, a couple of years ago, I tried to see if I can log back into it. Somebody used my name, have a different picture there, same first name, same last name, same email. That's the reason right there.
I think I understand. If you would give me a moment, Your Honor. One more line of follow-up questions. You'd indicated in your survey that you believe that, or you somewhat agree with the proposition that maybe accounts of police brutality are maybe overstated in the media. You remember answering that question?
I don't remember. Can you give me a recollection?
I'm sorry.
Please?
So the question was whether or not you agree. I think that news reports about police brutality against racial minorities is only the tip of the iceberg. And you indicated that you somewhat disagree with that proposition. Do you recall that?
Well, I don't recall. But, well, I'll say this. I think. Can you restate that question again?
Sure. You know, and I think the point of the question is whether or not you have any views that would suggest that that the media exaggerates the amount of police brutality that may be out in society.
I don't believe the media was doing that, but I do believe that sometimes things that we see in the media is that while people, I remember when when this thing started, there were people from my church, for instance, that were going there praying, giving food. Those part of that side of it was not showing, was not getting the coverage. So that's what I was trying to say. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like what you were pointing out is that what you see on the media oftentimes is the bad news and maybe not the good news?
Sometimes, yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I have no further questions. Thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
answers and candor today.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. And we would pass for cause.
Juror 27, you will serve on this jury. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is return to this courtroom, or the deputies will escort you to the other courtroom, 9 o'clock on March 29th.
Okay.
Now, having said that, we will probably give you a reminder in case things change as far as timing. But we're pretty confident in that date and time. But we'll give you a reminder in any case. There, you have a letter with you that got you into the building.
I do.
Please keep that letter. Keep it safe and make sure you. The deputy will collect the yellow lanyard from you when you leave today.
Okay.
You'll be reissued it when you come back.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
No.
Final reminder, you're not an investigator, you're not to read media. Certainly don't watch these proceedings preceding March 29th.
Okay.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank
You can go with the deputy. Before we wait for the next juror, Juror 98's questionnaire was completely blank. It turns out this is a juror who is over 80 years old. And so the first thing we are going to do is reach out to the juror and see if they wish to exercise their right under the rules, since they are 70 or older, to be excused from jury duty. If they do not exercise that, I'd ask if the parties want to make it easy, or we can bring her in, give her the questionnaire when she comes next time. So let's see what the first answer is, and then we'll go with the second. All right, actually come right on up here. Yep, you can put your stuff down there. And take the witness stand right next to me. Perfect. Right, and you are juror number 27, is that, or 28?
28.
28. Well, good afternoon. Thank you for waiting. The process takes a bit, and so we appreciate your patience.
Sure.
Before we do anything else, I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath.
Okay.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
Yes.
All right. Let me ask a couple things before I turn it over to the attorneys. Well, first of all, I'm keeping my mask on, and there's plexiglass between us, so if you'd like to remove your mask, it might be easier to hear you, but I leave that to your discretion, however you want to proceed. All right. Well, first of all, is everything on the questionnaire that we sent you? And by the way, thank you for filling it out and getting it back to us.
Yes.
Is there anything? Was everything on that true to begin with?
Everything there should be true.
Okay. Is there anything since you filled out the questionnaire that you thought you should change or add to? Because it's very common that people fill out the questionnaire, some months pass by, and they realize they forgot something or their opinions have changed. Anything like that?
In the questionnaire, I had mentioned with my real estate sales work that I would prefer not to serve on the jury, and I've thought about that more since, and I guess I've changed my thoughts there. I feel more willing to be on the jury and feel that the work would not be an issue.
All right, and you have kind of a time frame. If you are selected for this jury, you'd come back on March 29th, and then the trial itself would take about 4 weeks, and deliberation after that, or as part of the 4 weeks. And you think you can make that work with your work?
Correct. Yes, I do have people who can cover for me.
Okay. Do you think you'd be doing some after-hours work after your jury duty?
Pardon?
Do you think you'd be doing some after-hours work?
I would say it's possible in the evening. There might be phone calls with people who are covering for me.
Okay. Nothing that will keep you up so late that you fall asleep during jury time?
No, nothing like that.
All right, thank you. All right, the lawyers may have some questions that might prompt other things that you want to add to, so feel free to offer that information. We realize it's an evolving situation, so
Sure.
it's not going to get you into trouble if it's different from what's on the questionnaire.
Yep.
All right. Now, you're not supposed to read any articles. That was part of the questionnaire, was tell you to avoid anything on the media or TV, anything like that. We understand, however, that maybe inadvertently you may have seen a headline or seen something on TV briefly. Anything like that that has added to your knowledge about the case?
No, just the headlines. I've tried to avoid beyond the headlines.
Okay.
And the only thing that's probably come up in the headlines is the news about third degree.
Okay. And what do you remember about that? About the substance of what either the headline said or?
That it's something that the perhaps the prosecution would be in favor of, and adding that as an option, and that the defense maybe would not be as in favor. That's my headline impression.
Okay. The important thing is whether it was information before you filled out your questionnaire or information you filled out or after you filled out the questionnaire. Anything you know about the case from outside the courtroom, you have to put aside. You may have some information about this case and formed an opinion about the facts of the case. Got to put that aside. It's all right to have the opinions and to, have seen it. Everybody has seen something. But do you think that, just knowing yourself, do you think you could do that and put aside anything that was outside the courtroom?
Yes, I think I can.
Okay. Do you think basically you can decide this case based on the evidence in the courtroom and the law as I give it to you?
Yes.
I've read some the rules of law already, but you understand at the end when you hear all of the rules of law that must be applied, you have to apply them even if you disagree with them.
I agree. I
Okay.
understand.
All right. So you were given a list of witnesses. Did you recognize anybody on the list?
No, I did not.
All right. Anything else you think we should know about you? Any questions before I turn it over to Mr. Nelson?
No, the only thing to mention before, I think the question was asked, do I know anybody in any of the offices for any of the professional people here?
Yes.
And the only contact I thought of back in the room there was a person I worked with in the past in real estate who I believe works in Mr. Ellison's office.
Okay.
Max Kiley.
Who I do not believe has any participation in this case at all. Is that correct, Mr. Ellison?
That's right, Your Honor.
All right. So at most it would be, is there anything about knowing somebody in the Attorney General's office that would have?
Right, no, nothing there, no.
Okay, just want to make sure. I'm glad you brought it up though.
Yeah.
Very important. All right, with that then I'm going to turn to Mr. Nelson to inquire. As to juror number 28, you may inquire, Mr. Nelson.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much for your patience throughout the course of the day. I'm going to ask you a few questions about yourself generally, try to get to know you a little bit, and then I want to follow up with some questions about your answers in the questionnaire. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Okay. So tell me, when you first received your jury summons notice, what was your first reaction or first impression of that?
Well, it just felt that it would be potentially extremely different than any other sort of jury summons. It was understanding it's a major case event like that. So maybe just a little bit nervous, I suppose.
Okay. So did you get a note, like a regular notice first, and then then the questionnaire later, or did it all come in one group?
Initially, I got notice last summer for jury duty, and I took the 9-month whatever deferral, and then I was told at that point it would be in March, and the next thing I received, I believe, was a notice that it would be with this particular case.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me break it into two parts. That first notice that caused you to delay, what was your reaction when you got that notice?
Well, to that one, there was very mild reaction, only that I delayed at that point because I felt I was pretty busy with work, and if I had more time, I could plan accordingly like that. So it was just trying to plan a little bit more,
Sure.
my timing like that.
Do you wish you could go back?
I thought about that. It would have been simpler if I had said yes back in August.
All right. So then when you get the notice that you're a prospective juror in this case, that's when you became a little more nervous?
Yes.
And when you use the word nervous, what do you mean? Like, how do you mean?
Well, understanding it's a high-profile case, and anybody who would be on, I guess, feeling a certain amount of maybe pressure of doing the right thing like that.
Okay. So let me ask you a couple of follow-up questions on that. When you talk about pressure, were you concerned for your personal safety or the safety of your family?
No.
Okay.
No.
When you use the term pressure to do the right thing,
Yeah.
what does that mean to you?
I think if it's if I had gone into a case perhaps last summer that would not be a high-profile case, then the same expectations and I guess pressure to some extent are there to do the right thing. In a case like this, it's more, I guess, that the decision the jury makes has maybe broader implications, reactions from the general public, and just so it's more that knowing that the people, general public, is paying attention to the decision, and more pressure, I guess, to get it right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of what I think I'm asking you is, what is the right thing, if you had to say?
The right thing would be to follow the instructions that the judge has just been speaking of in terms of making the decision based upon the law as it's explained to me in the course of the trial, and have it based upon the evidence provided in the trial, and not on the reactions to images and paper, TV from last spring and summer.
Okay, thanks. So can you think of a circumstance in your personal life where you've been called upon to resolve a dispute or a conflict between two people? Not a real serious conflict. In my work
it's negotiating all the time
Okay.
with clients on both sides and other colleagues.
I apologize. My phone is off. I don't know why I got rang.
I'm glad it wasn't mine.
I apologize very much, Your Honor.
That's okay.
All right. Won't happen again.
So just in my work, but that's the normal sort of negotiating a resolution there between parties, and but in terms of I guess in past jobs I've had before my current real estate, in management, where you have issues like that with staff.
Sure.
Nothing quite like that maybe applies to this, but
Well, I mean, it does. Isn't that what this is really about, right? Resolving disputes between
right,
two
between
parties. Right.
Yes.
So how would you approach that situation in past management experience?
It's been quite a while from the management perspective. It's maybe been over 35 years ago.
Okay.
But I think that trying to get both parties to calm down, relax, and to be able to look at the situation from the other party's point of view also, and to be a little bit more objective like that, and empathetic to the other sides, to help. But there are two sides to the conflict, and to help with the resolution.
And so in that circumstance, let's, I mean, just in a hypothetical situation, you've got a problem, right? And one person looks at the problem and says, I think this is the way we should look at it. You've got another person who looks at that very same problem and says something completely different. How do you reconcile those two extremes?
Well, to some extent, you do your best to work with the people, encourage them to step back and be open, discuss, think about it, and then come to a decision. And they may not agree with the decision, they may not see the other person's point of view, but and then make a decision as a manager at that point on what I felt was the right thing to do. And they may not agree with the decision, but try to at least get them to open up their minds, and then again I would be the person who had to make the decision.
Okay.
And
Now,
live with that.
In this context, as you may be aware from the instructions, this will require a unanimous decision of
Correct.
12 people. In a situation where you can't, you've got two sides that aren't agreeing, how would you try to build consensus amongst the group to reach a decision?
I think that to encourage people to follow the instructions of the judge and to the jury, and to try to set aside more their past preconceptions, because it's very possible, at least, that the lack of agreement may be caused by past perceptions, not just the instructions of the judge and attorneys. And so I think I would try to focus on the facts of the case that are presented in the trial, and hopefully that they still understand, even with two people looking at the same presented facts, they'll disagree, but I would just try to focus on the facts presented in the trial and encourage people not to bring in their past impressions that are influenced in how they are interpreting the facts.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you. Is there a situation in your personal life that you can think of where you thought you were absolutely 100% right, certain, And then it later turns out you were wrong? Or your professional life? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, nothing that jumps out. I mean, I can think of many things where I've made mistakes in the let's say in maybe work that I've done and working with clients where I made mistakes, and then I realize that, and then I own up to it, admit it, and take responsibility when I've made errors, and make sure that the other person is made whole. And I've always done that in my real estate work with clients, and that's the only thing that comes to mind, I guess, when you ask that question.
and that's fair. In terms of owning up to your mistakes, do you think that Mr. Chauvin exercising his right to trial is somehow him saying, I'm not owning up to a mistake?
No, I think it's definitely his right as a citizen, as a person, to have a trial and to present his point of view and his facts.
And so let me ask you that. Mr. Chauvin has no obligation to present a single shred of evidence in this case.
Correct.
He has no obligation to present any witnesses or any evidence. Are you okay with that?
Yes, and that was one thing in my questionnaire that I had made a comment that I did not like. The idea that a defendant would not be forced to testify. I made some comment about that didn't feel quite right to me, but that didn't answer the question. I think the question was I agreeable to that? And yes, I understand that that's the defendant's right, and I accept that, and definitely accept that, agree that that's the law, and could work with that.
Okay.
So I looked over my questionnaire last night, and I looked at that answer, and I realized that was one that I didn't really answer the question, really.
Okay. And so you actually kept a copy of your questionnaire?
I did.
You may be the first person.
Yeah. I did.
Okay. And you actually reviewed your
I
answers.
reviewed it.
And so you were prepared to address some of these things.
Reviewed it a little bit, yep.
Okay. And great. Thank you. Do you have any concerns about COVID-19 or anything like that, seeing how the courtroom is now?
No. I've had my first vaccine. I'll have my second one a week from yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Then I'll be feeling, in the meantime, I do all the protective things.
Okay, great. So speaking of your questionnaire, I'm going to go through. I have some follow-up questions I want to kind of ask you about here. And since you've reviewed it, but if obviously I don't want to misstate anything, and I'm not trying to trick you, I just want to kind of follow through with some questions. So you obviously had a pretty extensive answer about what you had heard about the case prior to filling this out, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, we have to use yes or no.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And some of the things that you wrote, for example, that you believed, or it was your understanding, is the word, that George Floyd and Officer Chauvin had previous contacts. And then in a later sentence you write, in my mind, I am not sure about the past encounter, or in my mind, I have felt that these past encounters may have contributed to the aggressive tactics of Officer Chauvin. Did you get that? Where did you get that information from?
It was either a newspaper article in the Star Tribune or TV news, and that was probably fairly early on after the incident.
Okay.
And
Yep. And so I'm curious as to the word aggressive tactics. Did you form an opinion about, based on the news and the information you'd received, about the tactics that were used by Officer Chauvin in that instance?
right, so in my recollection of whatever news story I heard maybe last May or June, that there had been contact between Officer Chauvin at that time and George Floyd, that may have caused their initial contact there the day of the incident to be more aggressive.
Okay.
That there was a little history of, and that's the kind of early on background information that I know that does need to be put out of my mind, because it's not, unless it was presented in a trial. Because also I have no idea how accurate that story even was. That was shortly after the incident, and it may be totally erroneous as far as I know.
Okay. And so I'm just curious, if you didn't hear anything about that in trial, right? Because you said it's one of two things. It could be wrong information, or you may not hear about it in trial. Those are two different concepts. So it could be right, but you may not hear about it in trial. Do you understand that?
Correct. Okay.
And I'm not saying it is or isn't right, but if you have some information that you had learned from the media beforehand, and then you don't hear about it during the course of the trial, are you going to be able to set all of that aside, not bring it up, not talk about it, not remind people about stuff? Or is it going to be nagging in the back of your head and go, I remember reading something beforehand?
I guess that would be part of the media impressions that came on early that I would feel is very important. I feel that I can, do a good job of putting those out of my mind when it comes to the trial, because it's again, following the instructions of the attorneys and the judge, that I feel that I could do that. Yes.
Right. Okay. So, we're all human, and we all have opinions, and we all form opinions based on things that we see.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fair to say that you formed a pretty strong opinion about this matter quite early on, right?
Yeah, from the initial things in the news and just whatever. Yeah, I had seen the images on TV. I had a strong reaction.
Okay. And you testified, or it's not testified, you wrote in your questionnaire that you've seen video of Mr. Floyd's death on the news or internet 6 or more times.
Yeah, and I thought about that in terms of the video. I think what I've seen 6 or more times is the flashing of a particular image of Mr. Chauvin there at the time of the incident. That particular picture has been flashed many times. As far as a video of a little more extended like that, I think maybe it's been 4 or 5 times, or 3 or 4 times where there's been something on the news earlier where it showed a little bit more than just a picture like that. And
Okay.
so I would, yeah.
So there's, I guess this may be, we're all sort of presuming this to be like a viral video that
I would say it's just whatever was shown. I don't do anything on social media really, so whatever it was on the network news, local network or national news, basically. That's all I've seen.
Okay. So, and that's just a follow-up question that I have is, you never saw the news story and then went to the internet, pulled up whatever this original video was?
No.
And whether that was a video from a bystander or some other video that was on these news stories, you never did that?
Correct, yeah. The only things I saw that were on the network news.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it may be 10 seconds, it may be a still image, it may be a few seconds, it
Yes.
may be longer.
Yes.
But as far as you know, you've never seen the quote-unquote entire video.
Correct.
All right.
Correct.
And I take it you're a fairly regular watcher of the news?
Yeah, I watch the regular nightly national and local news.
Okay. And it's obviously been a very prevalent story in the media for some time, and seen
Right.
it 6 or more times.
Yes, yeah.
All right. So based on that, you were asked a question. From what you have seen, read, or heard, do you have a general impression of the defendant? And you checked the box, very negative. Agreed?
Yes, I did.
Yep. And so, based on the news media and conversations with friends and family, you have a very negative view of Officer Chauvin coming into this courtroom today.
Yeah. So I filled the questionnaire out in December, I believe it was, and so the image of Mr. Chauvin there kneeling on top of George Floyd was the impression in the media, and it went on for a length of time, and so that's a negative impression. Yes.
Right, and I'm not.
Yeah, no, that's a very negative impression.
Right,
and it doesn't necessarily mean that negative impression would prevent me from, looking at the facts behind the case or of the case. But that was a negative, and I think I made the same comment about the defendant. Excuse me, the deceased. The deceased. And that's based on the same stories on the national media or the local newspaper, Star Tribune, where they had mentioned other potential brushes with the law.
Okay.
And so that I had sort of a negative impression in terms of that also. I mean, I mentioned both, I guess.
Right. And sir, I don't mean to challenge you.
No, I understand.
Believe it or not, you're not the only person in the world that may have a negative impression of my client, and it's okay. But you're the only person who really knows what's in your heart and in your mind.
Yeah.
We have to try to take you at face value, right? And the ultimate question is you follow the news. You have a pretty lengthy recitation of what you remember from the news.
Mm-hmm.
You have a very negative opinion of Mr. Chauvin. You later say that you and your family members advocate for police reform. So your opinions have shaped some decisions you've made, right?
Yes.
Okay. And that's all okay. But in this courtroom, the question really honestly becomes, can you set all of that aside? Can you move all of and set it, just forget it, basically, and focus only on the evidence in this case?
I believe in terms of making a decision, if I were part of a jury, that I could and would make it based upon the facts presented in the case. It doesn't mean I forgot my impressions. I know that they're there, but it means, I guess, I feel I can put those aside. I can set those aside and follow the instructions that I'm supposed to follow as part of a jury.
Okay. So I mentioned this previously. You indicated that your daughter, son, wife, and yourself have all advocated for police reform. How have you so advocated?
The only person who's done any, my daughter was involved in several of the marches after the incident and after the so she was in some of the marches. She was the only one of the family member who participated in those. As far as police reform, I think I mentioned in my questionnaire that the one example I mentioned is not police reform. I think it's maybe just more criminal justice reform. And I think I mentioned there that how prisoners are treated in prison. What I've read about that has always bothered me a lot.
Okay.
And I've never been involved in any particular movements for police reform or criminal justice reform, but I've.
So when you say advocated for police reform, are you kind of talking within your social circle or professional circle?
Talking more with friends, friends and family like that.
Right.
And
you mentioned that your daughter has participated in some of the peaceful protests that occurred.
yes.
Okay. And as a juror, if you were to be a juror in this case, you're not allowed to even tell your daughter that you're involved in this case.
Correct. Yes.
Do you think that you would have pressure? I mean, if all of a sudden Dad is gone for 4 weeks and he's been in jury duty, and maybe your daughter will put together where you're at, right? Do you think that you would face any pressure from your family members to affect your judgment in this case? That would affect your judgment in this case?
No, I think that I would make it very clear. They don't live with me; they live, they have their own homes and everything. But I would make it very clear that I would not be discussing anything to do with the trial with them. Period. During that time frame.
So, can you imagine a scenario where you would sit through the trial, say not guilty? How would you explain that to your parents or to your daughters after the fact?
I would explain that based upon our instructions as jurors and evidence and facts presented at the case, this is how I came to that decision. And it was not based upon the impressions in the newspaper from last May. It was based upon the facts that were presented in the trial. And they'd have to sort of live with that.
Do you think you would disappoint them if you did that?
I would disappoint my daughter, yes. Probably, yes, I'm sure.
Would that weigh on your mind if you were a juror in this case?
No.
Now, you were also asked a series of questions regarding Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. And in context of Black Lives Matter, you say that you believe they are an important voice in calling out prejudices that exist, that devalue black persons. I think they sometimes go too far in their condemnation of power structures and policing that treat them unfairly.
Yes.
Can you explain what you mean in terms of how does Black Lives Matter go too far in their condemnation of power structure?
Well, an example would be maybe being behind the movement to defund the police, and whereas I would say that it's the approach I would be supportive of is reforming, change within, but the whole way of trying to defund, I guess, I do not agree with, and I think that and that would be an example, I guess. Feel they're going too far, yes.
Sure. And with respect to Blue Lives Matter, you say, I have strong respect for police officers and appreciate very much the service and protection I have received from them. Right. So
yes, my own personal experience with law enforcement has always been very positive. Okay. My personal experience.
Now I understand that after your undergraduate work, you did some seminary work.
Yes.
And ultimately ended up in the real estate business.
Yes, yeah. I went to New York City, and after I graduated from college in Minnesota, and went to seminary there for about 1.5 years, and then decided that was not the path I wanted to continue. So I stayed there and worked doing community outreach work in a neighborhood center there in New York City for another about 3 years, and then moved back to Minnesota.
Gotcha. Now you're, without saying his name,
Pardon?
without saying his name, I understand that your brother is a retired Minnesota judge.
Yes.
And have you spoken with your brother? Do you maintain a close relationship with your brother?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, he lives here in the Twin Cities, and I have not spoken with him about jury duty, or anything like that, at all. He does not know I've been called.
Okay.
And because COVID's covered this whole time, we have not been together since this happened.
So if he's listening right now, is he going to recognize your voice?
If he's listening, I'm sure he would.
Okay.
Yeah. 'Cause he,
So my question is, obviously you've answered the first part, which is you've not talked to him about your service as a potential juror in this case.
correct.
Leading into today, right?
I have not spoken at all. Yes.
And would it follow to reason that should you be selected as a juror, you're not going to call up your brother and ask him questions about the law or anything to do with this?
Correct.
case?
I would not. No.
You understand that Judge Cahill gets to decide what the law of this case is.
Correct.
Similarly, you have a brother-in-law who is a retired medical doctor,
Yes.
and if medical issues were to come up in this case, would you call your brother-in-law and say, can you explain to me what such and such a...
No, I would not. I would not.
And I do have to, I mean, I obviously, and I appreciate the fact that you filled this questionnaire out quite some time ago, 5 months ago or so, or excuse me, 3 months ago. And you've had some time to further reflect on some of your answers, and you raised one of the answers that I wanted to ask you about, which is the defendant's right to remain silent in a trial. Right? You understand that that's a constitutional
Yes,
principle.
exactly. Yes, yes, I do.
You understand that applies to every criminal defendant,
Yes, yeah,
and you understand that that applies to every United States citizen,
yes.
and you understand that that applies to people who are even just here visiting,
Or even what?
are just here visiting.
Yes.
You don't
yes,
have to be a
yes,
citizen to
Yeah.
invoke the Fifth Amendment.
Yes. Yeah.
And if Mr. Chauvin elected not to testify, do you understand you could not use that as a sign or an indication of his guilt?
Yes.
But you indicated in your questionnaire that you're not comfortable with that notion.
Well, I didn't answer the question. You know, the question, I forget how the question was, but I didn't read the question very carefully. So I didn't answer the question, and so I just went off on a little bit of a tangent that that over my lifetime, there's something about that that's always felt maybe not quite right, but I do understand that is that there's reasons for it, and it is the law of universal, and I understand that and accept that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just, the question says, under our system of justice, defendants have the right to remain silent, and if they exercise that right, their silence is not to be used against them. Would you have any difficulty following this principle of law?
No. No.
And so your discomfort is just sort of more, it's on a different, like, philosophical...
I think it's, I would say more right. Yes. Philosophical.
Are you able to set that aside? I mean, if this is something that you've actually pondered throughout your life, I mean, are you able to actually set that aside and follow the law?
Yes, I am. It's not something I've given, spent a lot of time pondering heavily at all. Nothing like that. It's just that at different times in my life, and it struck me as, I guess it struck me enough that I brought it up, in that questionnaire.
Okay. And again, it's okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I'm not questioning your
Yeah, but-
reasoning.
But,
But again, being that we have to sort of take you at your word, right?
Yes.
And it's obvious to me that you have some pretty strong feelings about social justice issues, and that you have some pretty strong feelings about, or opinions, I should say, about this case. And it was, you've thought enough about the Fifth Amendment that you felt you should bring it up in this context, right? And I understand you want to be honest, right? You want to say I can follow these rules, but again, when the rubber hits the road, so to speak, can you follow the rules?
I believe I can, yes.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Right.
Your Honor, we'll exercise it.
Juror 28, we're going to excuse you from service on this jury. What I'd like you to do is the deputy will ask for your lanyard and the letter you brought in. But I do want to thank you for your time here, both in filling out the questionnaire. Obviously, you put a lot of thought into it, and the questions you answered today. So,
Okay.
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Greg, hold on. So I have that as defense strike number 4. Is that correct? All right.
That's right.
And the other juror we were talking about was a 98. The jury office has made contact with that person, and they are in fact either 77, 78 years old, and has elected to withdraw from jury service, as is their right. So you can strike that person from your list as being excused by the jury office. All right, number 29. All right, come on up. Good afternoon. You are juror number 29, correct?
Correct.
Well, I'm going to continue to wear a mask, and we have plexiglass between us, so if you're more comfortable, and it might make it easier for the attorneys to hear, you can remove your mask for this time. And before I turn it over to the attorneys, there are just a couple things. First of all, I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath, so if you could raise your right hand. The most important thing, and you are a practicing attorney, is that correct?
Correct.
You understand that the reason why we ask all this is you have to put all that aside, decide the case just on what you hear in the courtroom, and the rule of law is as I give it to you.
Correct.
And you're fine with that?
I'm fine with that.
Do you think you could do that?
Yes.
And I ask this of attorneys. If you're on this jury, you are a practicing attorney. People might ask you your opinion about the law. And I hope the answer would be, well, we have to follow the law, the judge gives it to me. Do you think you could do that, not only yourself to follow the law that I give you, because as an attorney I'm sure you would, but to also tell people, whether I agree with what the judge said the law is, our duty is to follow the law. Could you do that?
Yes, I could.
All right, thank you. You were given a long list of witnesses, and did you recognize anyone on that witness list?
I did not.
Okay. And the length of trial, I think there are a variety of things about the trial. You said you want to serve on this jury, and you gave a number of different thoughts back and forth. I'm actually going to turn that over to the attorneys to talk about that,
Okay.
because they may want to ask you more probing details. I'll kind of just take it as it is on your questionnaire. So do you have any questions before I turn it over to Mr. Nelson?
I do not.
Okay, as to juror 29, Mr. Nelson, you may inquire.
Get this off here. Good afternoon. How are you today?
I'm doing well.
Good. I'm going to start with some general questions, if that's okay.
That's perfect.
Get to know you a little bit, and then we'll move into some specific questions about your questionnaire answers. Okay?
Sure.
So if I were to meet you in a social situation, tell me a few things you'd want me to know about you after I walked away.
Short list would be, I'm an attorney. I have a 2-year-old daughter. In my free time, I like to work out and go to museums and watch documentaries.
Okay. And how did you feel when you got your jury service, jury summons?
I've actually always wanted to be called for jury duty just because I'm an attorney and I wanted to go through the process. I've never received it before, so it was the first time I've ever received it, so it was kind of like, hey, I finally got it.
So it wasn't a shock, a surprise, or anything of that nature?
No.
How about when you learned that it was in connection with this particular case?
That was more surprising.
And how so?
I guess when you heard about it on the news, you never exactly expect that you'd be one of the people who'd be called as a potential juror. Just statistically, it's a small percentage.
Right. Did you have concerns about your personal safety or anything of that nature?
No.
And how about when you came down to the government center today?
I mean, it definitely looks different than any other time I've been here, but
Right. I'm assuming as a practicing lawyer, you've been here once or twice?
yes, more than once or twice.
Yeah.
Yes,
And it's a lot different to get into the building now, isn't it?
very different.
Did all of the fortifications, preparations, things of that nature, did it alarm you?
I wouldn't define it as alarming, no.
How would you define it?
To some extent impressive, just how different it is from what I normally see, but it wasn't necessarily off-putting or scary or anything like that. It was just very different than every other time I've been down here.
Okay. Did it give you any sense of security?
Yes.
So as a lawyer, I'm assuming you have quite a bit of experience dealing with people's conflict.
Yes.
So how do you approach the subject of conflict? How do you resolve conflict between two people?
Can you be more specific with an example?
Sure. I guess as a lawyer, sometimes we cause conflict, right?
Yes.
So think of a situation where it's just your friends as opposed to a client. A couple of friends are having a dispute about something. And they come to you and they say, help us, juror number 29, help us resolve this conflict. What tools do you bring to that type of a situation?
I think it's hard in conflicts that oftentimes there's both emotions and then someone's perspective and the facts of what's going on. So sometimes, depending on the person or friend that you're dealing with, you kind of have to take those step by step or separate them out, because maybe what appears to be the problem is not actually the problem. Comparing it more to in practice, that sometimes things are more about the principle than the facts or the law, and sometimes you have to talk to your client or opposing counsel or whoever it is to find out what's the root of the actual problem, because sometimes it's not what you always think.
Okay. Generally speaking, what area of law do you practice?
It would be civil litigation would be the most general.
Okay. Do you have any experience with criminal defense work
No,
or criminal prosecution work?
no.
Okay. Any other areas of law that you've practiced in?
No, it's all been civil litigation. I did do some clinic work in law school that involved female prisoners, but it was related to civil litigation.
Okay. So more specifically, rather than trying to resolve a conflict between two people, you're trying to determine which of these two people is telling the truth about a situation. How do you approach that?
Often comes down to credibility, if there's any sort of actual evidence, documents.
It's it's different as a lawyer, right?
Yes.
Okay. So let me ask you it this way: have you ever had a client lie to you?
I believe so, yes.
And how do you deal with that type of a situation? Your client comes to you and says, I need you to do X for me because I just, insert lie here, right? And how do you resolve, A, is this actually a lie, right? And how do you then approach that with your client?
If it's an obvious fabrication or lie right at that moment, address it right then. If you uncover it later on that something that they told you last week or an hour ago is incorrect, then have to call up and have a hard conversation about what that lie likely did to the case and if I can continue representing them.
Okay. Because there would be, I'm going to not go there. Do you represent individuals or businesses? Or both?
Both. Vast majority would be a business.
Okay. But you have people who own those businesses? Right?
Correct.
Okay. And sometimes people act out of self-interest. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And sometimes they may fabricate or make up something to advance that self-interest.
They may.
And part of your role as an advocate or as a lawyer is to kind of ferret through some of those truthful things and not truthful things to best advance your client's cause. Agreed?
Agreed.
In terms of a situation where maybe one of your client comes to you and says something and you become convinced that they're telling you the truth. Like it's great. You have all of the evidence in the world. Have you ever had a situation where it turns out it's wrong?
Not yet.
Not yet.
At least to my knowledge.
That you know of, right?
Yes.
Just how about in your personal life? Have you ever been convinced that you're right about something and then later find out you're wrong about it?
I have.
Okay. How are you willing to re-examine your views on things?
Yes.
Now I'm going to ask you a few follow-up questions in terms of your questionnaire. Did you keep a copy of your questionnaire?
I didn't. I wish I had, but I did not.
Okay. It's not very good lawyering.
I know. I should have.
The first question asks you to state what you recall about this incident. You're familiar with this incident, obviously.
I am.
And you gave a pretty long, detailed recitation of what you remembered happening or viewing in the news, right?
Correct.
Okay. And the information that you received was all from various media sources?
It was.
Okay. in your questionnaire, you responded that you have seen some video of the death of Mr. Floyd on the news or the internet, and you approximated that you had seen it 2 or 3 times. Does that sound right?
I would say so.
Right. And I just want to kind of go back and ask you a couple follow-up questions in this regard. Is it the entire, we refer to it as the Facebook video? Do you know what I mean when I say that?
I don't.
Okay. So do you understand there was a civilian bystander who took a video?
Yes.
And that video was uploaded into the social media site, and it went viral, and it became local, national, and international news, right?
Right.
That's the video I'm referring to. Is that the same video that you've seen 2 or 3 times?
I've never viewed it on Facebook, so I'm not sure.
Okay. Did it appear to be, the video you've seen, did it appear to be taken by a bystander?
Yes.
Okay. And is that the only video you've seen of this incident, as far as you know?
As far as I know, it might have been shown on a different platform, but yes, I believe so.
So did you go and, after you saw some news story, so let me clarify this. When you say you've seen it 2 to 3 times, are you referring to you've seen it 2 to 3 times on news stories?
The first time I ever saw it, it was on Instagram.
Okay.
And it was a short clip, maybe 30 seconds or so. And then I did see it on, I believe it was on CNN. But yeah.
Okay. But through, whether it be through social media, just general Googling, have you ever gone and tried to find a full, what we would refer to as a full-length video?
No, I haven't sought it out.
Okay. Have you ever seen the full-length video?
I'm not sure that I have. I don't think it's ever been that long.
Okay. So the majority of what you've seen, whether it be from news or social media platforms, is 30 seconds, a minute and a half, that kind of?
Correct.
Okay. And you also indicated that you and your friends and family members had had some conversations about this incident?
Yes.
And that even though they were months ago, you guys kind of just talked about it, right?
Right.
And really what you say here is that you take a very neutral view of both my client as well as Mr. Floyd, right?
Correct.
You were asked a question on this questionnaire relative to the what I'd refer to as the aftermath, the protesting and the rioting, and whether you thought that had a negative or a positive impact on our community. And you wrote, in general, negative. Uptown was destroyed and boarded up. Small businesses didn't deserve to have their places burned down.
Correct.
Okay. Do you think there was anything positive that came out of it?
I think in maybe not the methods, but I believe there is some positive awareness that has come of the incident. But yes, I would say overall it's been negative on our specific community, specifically Minneapolis and Uptown. I would say negative.
And you believe that you you believe you can be fair and impartial in this case.
I do.
And you may have a special appreciation because of your profession that you know you're obligated to follow the law as the judge gives it to you and the facts as presented in case.
Correct.
And you can do that fairly and impartially?
I can.
You were asked a couple of questions in the questionnaire about both Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. Do you recall what you wrote or the general content of it?
I think the question related to if I supported either of them. Was the
Yeah,
question?
did you view them favorably, very favorably, favorably, neutrally, somewhat disfavorably, or very disfavorably? I think is how it's phrased.
Okay.
And I believe you, for both of the Blue Lives and Black Lives Matter movements, you had a neutral response to it. with respect to Black Lives Matter, you wrote, I understand the movement. I do not actively participate in the movement. It does bring awareness to issues, but I don't always think the methods achieve any specific results, at least this far. That's what you wrote.
Correct.
You stand by that?
For the most part, yes.
How would you change it today?
It's hard to put into specific words. I stand by that general premise. It's hard to articulate. I know the movement has been going on for quite some time, and it's evolved over time. I think more of my specific experiences with it were more towards the infancy, where there might not have always been a clear path of something being articulated for, we're protesting because we want X, Y, Z to happen. And I think over time it has changed, but when I've been specifically have memories of it, it was more towards the infancy, and it wasn't always this clear path, and sometimes that was.
As the organization has evolved, do you think you've become more supportive of it or less supportive of it?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily changed my support for it. Maybe my appreciation for it changing, but I wouldn't say it somehow has made me more supportive of it, or, the reverse. I wouldn't say that.
With respect to the same thing with respect to the Blue Lives Movement, kind of the same similar approach to it, neutral.
Yes.
You have a small child at home?
I do.
Okay. This is obviously a massive commitment. If you were to be selected as a juror, would you be concerned about caring for your child?
I would not. My child is in full-time daycare. The hours are the same as if I were to be at work. And I do have a support system in place that could step in if need be.
Okay. So I don't think it's the intent at this point, but there's a possibility, as is written in the questionnaire, that the jury could be sequestered and put up in a hotel. Would that change your concerns?
It does a little, but not enough for me to say that it would hinder me or stop me from being on the jury.
You did some work for a nonprofit legal organization.
Correct?
And was that in law? Is that what you were talking about in law school?
It was in law school, and then I continued volunteering from time to time since then.
Okay. You believe the jury system is fair in this country?
I think it's as fair as it can be if everything in the system is working properly, which of course is up for debate, but I think for the most part it can work.
Okay. And do you have those same feelings towards the criminal justice system?
I do. When I was volunteering in law school, I did see a different side of it when I was helping women in prison, and it did give me a different appreciation for just how hard it can be, that even if you're given all the tools while you're in the system, that sometimes life circumstances are just so hard that even if you have all the tools, you wind up going back just for environmental factors.
So the question the judge alluded to in terms of do you want to serve as a juror on this case, and you kind of flip-flop a little back and forth. I mean, can we talk about that?
Sure. I think it'd be a little strange if someone had this gut reaction of, yeah, I need to be on that jury. That would be a little strange to me. I think I'd be a very good juror. I think especially considering I have a legal education. I have a very good memory. I think that I have a lot of assets to be on a jury. Having a small child at home, it then gives me pause saying, well, that would be a big commitment. It could be emotionally draining. But then again, everybody has a job. Everybody has outside commitments and likely small children and people that they love and care about. So it's one of those, everyone has a civic duty, and I very much believe in that civic duty. So I went more on the neutral side because I think to say emphatically that I want to be on the jury is just a strange response.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. With respect to, if you were to be a juror on this case and you're sitting back in the jury room, you understand that your obligation would be to follow the law as Judge Cahill gives it to you. Do you understand that?
I do.
And you understand that you would have that obligation even if you disagreed with Judge Cahill's legal definitions. Do you understand that?
I do.
Now you're back in the, if you're in this jury and over the course of the next several months, or not weeks, excuse me, not months, next several weeks, it's going to become known that you're a lawyer. I'm assuming you're going to have conversations with your fellow jurors. How would you deal with any sort of pressure of potential jurors to ask you to help them understand the law?
Quite frankly, I'd probably come up with kind of a blanket statement of what you've already reiterated. Also, it's easy to fall on the fact that I do not practice criminal law, so I am not someone who they really should be asking that type of information from, because I don't know it just as much as they don't know it. That might not be completely true since I took criminal law. But, yeah, I would not be in a position where I'd be able to advise anyone on criminal law, and I would tell them as such.
Okay. Your Honor, can we have a very brief sidebar before I confer with my clients?
We're going to go off audio. As I told you before, this is on video, or this is not on video at any time, but this is on audio. Back out outside this courtroom, and so I would, do you need more
I need
inquiry?
a few minutes to, or just a moment to confer with my client. And
Absolutely.
Thank you. Sorry. May I ask a few more questions?
Sure.
Just a follow-up question. So, ma'am, my principal concern is actually you, and I understand every potential juror may have children and things of that nature, but your child is quite young. If you were to be sequestered in a hotel for a month, would you be able to make arrangements for the care of your child?
I would.
Okay. I'm going to just need one more second and be right back.
The other courtroom. We'll bring you back about 3:15.
All right.
All right, we stand in recess until 3:15.